Welcome to Brave Words, True Stories Told Well. I'm Rob Carlton.
And I'm Adrian Ferreira. Our storyteller today is Guy Noble. He's a musical composer, a conductor, a pianist and a broadcaster. He has conducted all the orchestras, all of them, Sydney, Melbourne, Adelaide, Tasmania, Queensland, as well as Auckland, Philharmonic and Hong Kong, Malaysia. He's just everywhere, this guy. He's worked with all sorts of international performers, including Harry Connick Jr., the Beach Boys, Olivia Newton John, and stacks of others.
This year, Guy is conducting a tour with the Whitlams in Hobart, Brisbane and Adelaide, producing his own show, Guy Noble's Very Serious Guide to Classical Music, at City Recital Hall in July, and touring to Oslo, Copenhagen and Hamburg for Halar Music Tours.
Guy's story was recorded back in 2024 at Lion's Den in Gosford, and I'll let him introduce it.
My story tonight is called As Ever We Never Said Goodbye, which is actually a song title from the musical Sunset Boulevard. And you might have noticed that Sunset Boulevard is coming to the Sydney Opera House this winter. And it takes me back to 1996 when I worked on the first Australian production in Melbourne as assistant musical director. And I'd been playing the piano professionally for a while at that stage, and I decided to learn to conduct, and one way to do it was through musicals, because you could learn the craft in a less frightening environment than standing up in front of, the Sydney Symphony, where they can smell the fear, and you are lucky to have no more than 2.5 minutes before they turn on you like tigers snatching out the throat of a hapless Christian in the Colosseum in Rome in 24 BC. In 1996, I was in the pit of Phantom of the Opera playing the keyboard and conducting 2 shows a week as assistant to a psychotic musical director who should not have been doing the job. And her boss was the musical supervisor of Phantom, Brian Stacey. And Brian was everything I wanted to be. He conducted musicals, opera, ballet, all the major orchestras around the country and beyond. He was debonair. He did everything with a light touch. And Brian told me he was setting up another Lloyd Webber musical, Sunset Boulevard in Melbourne, and would I like to be his assistant? I said, yes, I would love to. I told him the Phantom Orchestra liked me much more than this terrible conductor I was working with. He said, you'd have to be Jack the Ripper for them not to like you more. Sunset Boulevard is Andrew Lloyd Webber's musical take on the famous Billy Wilder film, with Norma Desmond, the faded star of silent movies, living in a mansion with her weird, bald German butler Max, and, in Michael Jackson style, her pet monkey, who we only see dead, not leaping about the candelabras. She takes up with Joe Gillis, a much younger writer, who ends up living in the mansion in a relationship with this much older woman and hating himself for it. This is an unusual flip on the much more cliched older man with much younger woman scenario, which we see all the time in film and in real life. I mean, I'm still getting over the fact that Jerry Hall married Rupert Murdoch. I mean, did she not wake up some mornings thinking, hang on, I used to be married to Mick Jagger, and now I'm with Yoda? We had Deborah Byrne as Norma Desmond, and as Joe Gillis, a very young Hugh Jackman, and as Max, Norma's butler, an actor imported from Germany because obviously no one in Australia was talented or hairless enough to play a bald German. His name was Norbert Lammler, and he would spend hours in his dressing room doing weights and sit-ups. When you opened the door, you would be assailed by a Germanic body odour, the like of which I have never smelt and never want to smell again. Sunset Boulevard was a big event with a show opening the newly fully restored Regent Theatre in Collins Street, and there was a lot of money at stake. The production itself cost more than $15 million. Music theatre is run very much like an army. Everyone has their place in the hierarchy, and I realised early on that even though music theatre has music in the title, music is the least important part of the show. The power resides with the director and the technical departments. It's also just one step away from a franchise operation like McDonald's. The assistants to the original creatives were rehearsing us in Melbourne, and their job was to make the show look and sound exactly the same as it did on the West End and Broadway. Same design, same costumes, same acting, same singing. We were rehearsing our way to a faithful recreation of a musical Big Mac. I spent much of my time with Brian in the mansion rehearsal room, where Joe and Norma and Max had their scenes separate to the ensemble cast, doing dance routines in another room. The assistant director was an Australian, Mark Gall. I really liked Mark, but he would often say the most ridiculous things in rehearsal. Once he told our star, "I like what you're doing here, Deborah. You're not getting any support from any of the furniture." Paul Boheme was the musical supervisor, so he was Brian's boss. A big, brash American. He conducted the show on Broadway with Glenn Close and was mostly high as a kite on what might have been cocaine or some other psychoactive stimulant. Brian, who was quite capable of conducting entire ballets and operas on his own, had to suffer Paul watching over him, complimenting him on a successful tempo. I thought it was demeaning. But Brian kept pretty cool through all this. I learnt that he was quite eccentric. He rode a big motorbike to and from the theatre, but with a carpet bag on the back, like some sort of leather Mary Poppins. In our dressing room, he had a china pot to brew proper tea with proper leaves and some china teacups and a mug with a teddy bear waving a bat on for me. We had lots of chats together during rehearsals, and he confided that the role of the music director was basically a shit filter, filtering the shit coming down from the management and filtering the shit coming up from the orchestra. I wondered why I even wanted to do this damn job. Soon we moved into the theatre for the final weeks before opening night. And I remember sitting right at the back of the Regent as they tested the arrival of Norma's mansion. This huge structure, 2 stories high, was meant to silently glide down the stage and arrive, and there would be gasps from the audience. But the Regent Theatre was built as a cinema, not a theatre, and the proportions were too big. So it was so far away, it looked like Norma lived in a gilded shack. I thought to myself, we are doomed. This show is not going to work in this space. Every production I've ever worked on, everyone loses their mind before opening night. There's just so much pressure and anticipation. Everything is agonised over. There were heated discussions in the technical department about which fake dead monkey to be used. They had 2 versions, but one was too small and the other one was the right size. But then there was a shout from the back of the dress circle. "We can see the monkey's penis. The penis is too big." You never hear that in rehearsals for The Sound of Music. But it all came together as these things do, and we were on the second to last preview before opening night. Brian and I had dinner in between rehearsal and performance at a lovely little Italian place in Flinders Lane. Over a glass of wine, he told me he just wanted the damn show to open and all these psychotic micromanagers and cocaine addicts to depart and let us get on with it. I secretly wished that he would get bored after a while and just leave me in charge so I could make the step up to being a musical director in my own right. The show went well, and afterwards I waved him goodbye as he rode off with his crazy carpet bag, and I took the tram home to South Melbourne. The next morning I got a call very early at 7:30. I was still half asleep. It was Tony, the 3rd keyboard player from the show. He said, "Have you seen the news? There had been a hit-and-run accident with a car and a motorbike the night before at an intersection in the north of the city, and Brian Stacey was dead." It was incomprehensible. It just couldn't be happening. I felt completely sick. I knew my life was certainly about to change. We all went in a state of shock to the theatre, and it was decided, of course, that the show must go on. Paul Boheme, the music supervisor, was to conduct the opening night performance. Paul was particularly edgy and nervous that night. It was one thing to tell someone what to do as opposed to doing it yourself. And of course, he was upset, as we were, about Brian, as we all were. He conducted the first act like a madman, a windmill. Then in the interval in our dressing room, he said, "Take off my shirt," which was sodden with sweat. "Massage my arm! Massage my arm!" I remember thinking none of this was in my contract. I managed to settle him down. He returned to the pit for the second half and once again conducted with such wild movements and thrashings that he sort of went into a muscular spasm and couldn't move his arms. He motioned to me with whatever limb was still working to come from my keyboard and conduct the rest of the show, but I was furious, and I snarled, "You stay there and conduct. We've just lost Brian. Get a grip." Well, that was Saturday night. There was an opening night party, but it felt more like a wake. And on the Sunday, all the directors and supervisors and cocaine addicts disappeared, and we were left on our own. And I was left on my own. I conducted my first show on the Monday night and then continued doing all 8 shows a week for more than 6 weeks because I was Brian's assistant, but there was no one who knew the show well enough to assist me. I was doing all the cover calls, getting the understudies and the alternate Norma up and running. I was a shit-felter extraordinaire. I was tired, I was grief-stricken, and I was guilty. I know I hadn't caused Brian's death. I wasn't driving the car, but I did wish for him to leave the show. Did I have supernatural powers? This was my stressed and weird state of mind at the time. I took long showers at the theatre before the show to try and wash off the stress, but death was everywhere through the show. It began with the body of Joe Gillis floating dead in the pool. There was Brian. Then there was the dead monkey. That was Brian too. I started to have full-blown panic attacks. One was in Dimmicks, where I felt so faint and terrified I had to lie on the floor in the general fiction section till my heart stopped pounding. There was no counselling. There was no care from the company. There were other more important dramas to attend to. Deborah Byrne had her own demons and would just go missing. One night she rang 30 minutes before the show and said, "I'm on a beach. Please find me." Through all of this, Hugh Jackman became the true star of the show, even though, and was determined not to take a single performance off, even though he had a really good understudy. One matinee I was told by company management that he had no voice and was running a fever, but still determined to go on. I thought, right, that's it. I went to his dressing room. He was in the shower, in tears, trying to make his croaky voice work. I threw him a towel and said, "Go home," and made sure he left the building. But I wish someone would do the same for me. The show limped on. It was hardly a feel-good musical with one of the major characters gets killed at the end. And Sunset closed after only 6 months, losing millions of dollars. But I was so relieved. It was like the contractual connection between Brian and I was dissolved, and I could just properly grieve the loss of a fine colleague, a mentor, and a friend away from the pervading darkness of the musical. He was 50 when he died, and I was 33. And now I am 10 years older than he was when he left the theatre that night. And I still have his tea mug with a little conducting teddy bear, and I think of him often, and how similar we are in so many ways in our outlook and performance. But I will never, ever buy a motorbike. And years later, I had another bout of guilt about my supernatural powers of wishful thinking. I was at a premiere of a Melbourne Theatre Company show which was so dreadful and boring, I thought, if only something would go wrong and we could get out of here. And barely 30 seconds later, there was a commotion in the front row, and the director had to stop the show and come out on stage to tell us there was a medical emergency, a heart attack, and we all needed to leave the theatre. Part of me was, oh no, what have I done? I hope the other are okay. And the other part was, yes, let's go have a drink.
Guy, he's so playful, and he has a voice for radio.
He does have a voice for radio. I love listening to that story. What's extraordinary about Guy, I mean, that story is heartbreaking. And that was a really, really close friend. But and you get that sense, but also the levity and playfulness that he brings to it.
He just sees all the absurdities that go on in this industry, and he's just, happy to skewer them. He manages to sort of survive and stay buoyant over such a long career. He's so talented.
He is, absolutely. We've seen his show, Guy Noble's Very Serious Guide to Classical Music, and let me assure you, it's not very serious.
It's a ripper. It's a ripper.
It's an amazing guide. He really, really is. he makes that sort of music so accessible and so fun. He just really plays with here's the emotion, here's how they got that. And then he plays it all so beautifully, it just rips out of his fingers.
Yeah, so check it out if you're going to be in Sydney. It's something to catch for sure.
Absolutely. Other than that, my show, Virgin and Knife Fight, continues to tour. I've just signed on to the Sydney Comedy Festival, so that's coming up in May. Right now I'm on in Adelaide and all the places in between.
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.
Bye-bye.